Imagine if a simple shift in how you notice the world could rewire your brain, calm your stress, improve your sleep, and make your relationships stronger, all without spending a single dollar or taking a single pill. That shift is gratitude, and today we're going to explore the science behind it and how to make it a daily practice that transforms your life. Gratitude is a neurological state that enhances emotional regulation and reduces stress, and understanding this begins with recognizing how deeply intertwined gratitude is with the brain's reward and emotional systems. When a person experiences genuine gratitude, especially in response to meaningful social interactions, specific neural pathways become activated that orchestrate both emotional processing and physiological responses. One of the primary systems involved is the dopaminergic pathway, the same pathway responsible for motivation, reinforcement learning, and feelings of pleasure. When gratitude is felt, dopamine release increases, creating a rewarding sensation that not only elevates mood, but reinforces behaviors that foster connection, cooperation, and trust. This reinforcement effect is one reason gratitude has evolved as a mechanism to strengthen social bonds within groups. The act of feeling appreciated or valuing others' support becomes intrinsically motivating and shapes future behavior. Additionally, serotonin, a neurotransmitter linked to long-term well-being and emotional balance, also increases during deep gratitude experiences. Unlike the short-lived burst of dopamine, serotonin contributes to a more sustained sense of inner calm and contentment. This dual action of dopamine and serotonin effectively balances immediate emotional reward with longer-term mood regulation. Alongside these chemical shifts, gratitude engages key brain regions, including the prefrontal cortex, which is essential for emotional regulation, higher reasoning, and conscious decision-making. Activation in this region correlates with improved self-control, greater emotional stability, and a reduced tendency to react impulsively to stressors. Gratitude essentially strengthens neural circuitry associated with positive interpretation, meaning that over repeated experiences, individuals become more prone to noticing opportunities for joy and connection rather than focusing on threats or deficits. At the same time, gratitude reduces activity in the amygdala, the brain region responsible for threat detection and stress responses. By dampening amygdala activation, gratitude lowers physiological arousal associated with anxiety, hypervigilance, and fight or flight reactions. Because the amygdala significantly influences the release of stress hormones, especially cortisol, this shift can translate directly into measurable biological benefits such as reduced inflammation, lower resting cortisol levels, and improved autonomic nervous system balance. This matters because chronic stress disrupts sleep, weakens immune function, impairs memory, and escalates emotional reactivity. Gratitude interrupts this stress feedback loop, supporting resilience and mental clarity. Importantly, the power of gratitude isn't limited to moments of happiness. It functions as a regulatory mechanism even during adversity, helping the brain reinterpret challenges through a lens of support rather than isolation. When someone recalls a moment when others helped them, neural patterns shift from self-focused rumination to relational processing, which engages networks associated with safety and belonging. These shifts don't occur merely from listing things one is grateful for. They require emotional depth, narrative context, and a sense of meaning. Gratitude becomes a training protocol for the nervous system, reinforcing calmness and connection as the default state rather than fear or scarcity. This neurological reframing doesn't just change momentary feelings, it alters baseline patterns in the brain over time. By repeatedly activating neural pathways tied to reward, connection, and emotional regulation, gratitude can lead to long-term neuroplastic changes that make it easier to experience positive emotions and harder to fall into chronic stress patterns. Receiving gratitude is more impactful than generating it alone because the human brain is wired to respond strongly to social acknowledgement, validation, and recognition from others. When someone expresses gratitude toward us, it activates neural circuits associated with social bonding, empathy, and reward in a way that self-generated gratitude often cannot replicate. This response begins in the brain's limbic system, particularly in areas involved in processing social emotions and relational significance. Hearing that our actions positively affected someone else provides evidence of value, purpose, and connection, which stimulates dopamine release and strengthens circuits associated with prosocial behavior. This isn't simply about feeling appreciated, it's about receiving external feedback that confirms our efforts mattered, which reinforces identity and motivates future contributions. In contrast, when gratitude is internally generated, the brain often treats it as reflective thought rather than relational interaction. Internal gratitude can still activate reward pathways, but typically to a lesser degree because it lacks the interpersonal component that communicates social belonging. Human evolution favored cooperation, and being valued by others historically increased survival. Therefore, the brain is primed to assign greater significance to gratitude that comes from outside rather than from self-reflection alone. When someone thanks us sincerely, especially with detail and emotional clarity, the experience can trigger a long-lasting memory that acts as a reference point during stress or self-doubt. These memories function like emotional anchors, reminding the nervous system that support exists and that we are part of a social network rather than isolated. Receiving gratitude is also powerful because it shifts the perspective from self-criticism to self-worth. Many people are more attuned to their failures than their contributions, and external gratitude interrupts that cycle by offering tangible evidence that their presence or actions made a difference. This can recalibrate self-perception, increasing self-esteem and reducing internal narratives of inadequacy. From a neurological standpoint, the shift engages the prefrontal cortex, which integrates emotional information with logical reasoning, helping individuals reframe their identity through the lens of contribution rather than deficiency. Over time, this fosters resilience and emotional stability because the brain develops associative links between personal effort, social reward, and emotional fulfillment. Another dimension to consider is emotional resonance. When someone expresses gratitude toward us, we often experience the event as a shared emotional moment. Mirror neuron systems activate, allowing us to feel the emotional state of the other person, strengthening empathy and relational depth. This bidirectional emotional exchange amplifies neural signaling because multiple systems, reward, empathy, memory, and social cognition, are active at once. Internal gratitude, while beneficial, typically involves fewer overlapping systems and therefore creates a more limited neural impact. Receiving gratitude can also promote long-term behavioral change more effectively than self-directed gratitude. It reinforces patterns like generosity, cooperation, and patience because the brain learns that these actions lead to meaningful social outcomes. This reinforcement effect can influence future decision-making, making individuals more likely to invest in relationships, contribute to group efforts, and view others with trust rather than suspicion. In this sense, gratitude received becomes a catalyst not just for emotional well-being, but for shaping who we become over time. Rooted in connection rather than isolation, powerful gratitude stems from specific, emotionally vivid experiences because the brain responds far more strongly to detailed narratives than abstract or generalized statements. When gratitude is tied to a concrete moment, where you can recall the environment, the emotions involved, the tone of someone's voice, or the circumstances that led to the event, the brain activates deeper layers of emotional memory. These memories engage the hippocampus, which encodes context and detail, and the amygdala, which assigns emotional significance. When both areas are activated together, the experience is stored with more intensity, making it easier to recall later and more influential in shaping ongoing emotional states. A vague statement like, "I'm grateful for my family," lacks the sensory and emotional cues needed to trigger substantial neural engagement, whereas recalling a moment when a family member comforted you during a painful experience stimulates multisensory pathways and leads to a more profound shift in physiology and mood. Emotionally vivid gratitude also activates the brain's storytelling circuits, which help integrate experiences into personal identity. Humans understand meaning through narrative. Without detail, gratitude becomes a cognitive exercise rather than an emotional one. When gratitude is tied to a specific event, such as someone supporting you during failure or providing help when you lacked resources, the brain registers the experience as part of your relational history, reinforcing the idea that you are supported and connected. This narrative integration affects how you view future challenges. Instead of feeling alone or overwhelmed, the brain has stored evidence that others have shown up before, shifting default emotional patterns from vigilance to trust. Specificity also magnifies empathy. When you recall a vivid moment of gratitude, you not only focus on your own feelings, but also on the motivations and emotions of the person who helped. The brain begins to simulate their perspective, activating networks associated with social cognition and prosocial behavior. This strengthens the relational bond beyond the memory itself, reinforcing not only what happened, but why it happened and what it meant to both parties. Emotional depth creates a reciprocal loop. The more vividly the event is remembered, the more meaningful the relationship feels, which in turn makes future interactions more genuine and cooperative. Vivid gratitude experiences also create stronger long-term physiological effects. The nervous system responds more robustly when emotional memories are vivid, increasing the release of neurotransmitters like serotonin and oxytocin. These chemicals lower stress responses and promote feelings of safety and belonging. Over time, repeatedly revisiting specific gratitude memories can recalibrate the autonomic nervous system, making a calm, regulated state more accessible. Generalized gratitude lacks the intensity required to trigger this response consistently, which is why many people journal lists without experiencing meaningful change. The brain needs emotional depth, not repetition, to create neural plasticity. Finally, emotionally vivid gratitude allows the experience to be replayed with accuracy. When memories contain rich detail, specific words spoken, physical sensations, or visible expressions, they can be mentally revisited in a way that reactivates the original emotional state. This ability to re-experience gratitude gives it lasting power, allowing a single meaningful moment to influence mood, identity, motivation, and resilience long after the event has passed. Social connection is the biological basis for gratitude's positive effects because the human nervous system evolved to thrive in cooperative groups rather than in isolation. Gratitude serves as a signal that reinforces trust, mutual support, and shared purpose, which historically increased the likelihood of survival. When gratitude is expressed or received, the brain interprets it as evidence of reliable social bonds, activating neural pathways involved in safety, belonging, and prosocial behavior. These pathways include structures like the ventral striatum, which processes reward, and the medial prefrontal cortex, which helps interpret social meaning and integrate it into one's sense of self. This interconnected activation creates a state in the nervous system that reduces vigilance and allows energy to shift away from threat monitoring toward behaviors like collaboration, learning, and long-term planning. Gratitude's effects on stress are also rooted in social connection. When people feel supported, the brain downregulates activity in regions involved in detecting danger, especially the amygdala. This reduces activation of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which controls the body's stress hormone response. Lower cortisol levels mean improved immune function, better sleep, and enhanced capacity to regulate emotions. The body is more willing to enter states of rest and recovery when it perceives itself as socially protected. In contrast, chronic loneliness triggers opposite biological patterns: heightened inflammation, disrupted sleep, and persistent stress responses. Gratitude helps shift the body out of that defensive mode by communicating on a physiological level that others are present and supportive. At a relational level, gratitude strengthens bonds because it highlights reciprocity. When someone is thanked in a meaningful way, they feel their actions are noticed and valued, which motivates further generosity. Meanwhile, the recipient of support feels seen and cared for, creating a reinforcing feedback loop. This cycle is not just emotional, it is biochemical. Gratitude is associated with increased oxytocin, a neuropeptide linked to pair bonding, empathy, and trust. Oxytocin modulates neural responses to social cues and makes cooperative behavior more likely in the future. With repeated experiences, relationships become reinforced at the level of neural circuits, making social interaction feel more rewarding and reducing fear-based withdrawal behaviors. The social basis of gratitude also shapes identity. When gratitude is experienced through relationships, whether by receiving support or recalling moments of kindness, it shifts how individuals perceive themselves in relation to others. Instead of viewing life as an isolated struggle, the mind begins recognizing patterns of connection and shared effort. This identity shift influences decision-making, emotional responses, and resilience. People who internalize gratitude through social experiences tend to interpret challenges as manageable because they believe help is available. Consciously or unconsciously, this relational confidence alters how the brain predicts outcomes, reducing anxiety and increasing willingness to engage with new opportunities. In addition, gratitude enhances communication and emotional transparency. Sharing appreciation requires acknowledging vulnerability, recognizing that another person contributed something meaningful. This vulnerability builds intimacy and deepens trust, which strengthens social networks over time. Even observing gratitude between others, such as hearing a story of someone being helped, can activate similar neural pathways because the brain is sensitive to social models. Witnessing kindness can increase motivation to participate in cooperative behavior and fosters a collective culture of support. Through these mechanisms, gratitude does not merely produce positive feelings, it reinforces the neural and physiological foundations that allow humans to thrive within interconnected communities. Depth and emotional immersion outperform routine journaling because the brain responds to the intensity and meaning of an experience, not simply the act of recording it. When gratitude is practiced in a shallow, repetitive way, such as writing quick lists without emotional engagement, the nervous system treats it as a cognitive task rather than an emotional event. The prefrontal cortex may register awareness of positive elements, but deeper emotional regions like the amygdala and hippocampus remain minimally activated. Without emotional salience, the experience does not trigger significant release of neurotransmitters such as dopamine or serotonin, which are responsible for reinforcing positive states and shaping long-term neural patterns. This is why routine journaling often loses effectiveness over time. The brain adapts to repetitive input and stops responding with the same intensity. In contrast, immersive gratitude practices activate multiple systems at once because they involve vivid detail, emotional recall, and personal meaning. When someone recalls a moment vividly, how an interaction felt, why it mattered, and what changed as a result, the hippocampus encodes the experience with contextual richness, while the amygdala tags it with emotional significance. This pairing leads to stronger memory consolidation and greater impact on future emotional states. Emotional immersion also recruits the body's physiological responses. Heart rate slows, muscle tension decreases, and the parasympathetic nervous system becomes more dominant, creating a state associated with safety and connection. These biological responses help anchor gratitude into the nervous system rather than leaving it as a surface-level exercise. Depth also influences identity, which routine journaling rarely accomplishes. When gratitude is tied to a narrative, such as overcoming difficulty with someone's support, it reinforces a personal storyline of resilience and connection. Over time, these narratives shift self-perception. Individuals begin seeing themselves as supported rather than isolated, capable rather than helpless. Journaling that simply lists items rarely engages identity because it lacks story, context, and emotional meaning. The brain does not generalize from abstract lists. It generalizes from emotionally vivid experiences that demonstrate how relationships and circumstances shape one's life. Another reason depth matters is that emotional immersion engages social circuitry. Even when the moment being recalled happened in the past, replaying a vivid memory can reactivate the original social and emotional pathways. This includes the release of oxytocin, which fosters trust and bonding, and activation of neural networks involved in empathy and perspective taking. Routine journaling generally fails to activate these systems because it lacks relational context and emotional resonance. Without this activation, the practice may feel helpful intellectually, but does not create lasting shifts in mood, behavior, or physiological regulation. Deep gratitude also creates conditions for lasting neural plasticity. Intense emotional experiences are more likely to strengthen synaptic connections, making it easier for the brain to access positive emotional states in the future. Repetition matters, but only when paired with emotional engagement. Otherwise, repetition simply reinforces shallow processing. In this way, gratitude is similar to physical training. Quality of effort determines the outcome more than frequency alone. When gratitude is practiced with depth, it reshapes neural pathways associated with stress, memory, and connection. When practiced routinely without depth, it remains a surface-level habit that produces minimal transformation. Regular practice can lower cortisol, improve sleep, and strengthen relationships because gratitude influences both the nervous system and the social environments that shape long-term well-being. When gratitude is experienced consistently, the body begins to shift from a state of chronic stress to a state of regulation and safety. Cortisol, the hormone associated with stress and vigilance, decreases as gratitude activates neural pathways that suppress threat responses. This shift is driven partly by reduced amygdala activity and increased engagement of the prefrontal cortex, which helps reinterpret situations through a lens of connection rather than danger. Lower cortisol has cascading benefits: improved immune function, reduced inflammation, better metabolism, stabilized mood, and increased mental clarity. People who experience stress regularly but also practice gratitude are more likely to recover quickly because the nervous system becomes conditioned to return to baseline rather than remaining in prolonged activation. Sleep improves as a byproduct of this regulation. High cortisol levels interfere with sleep cycles by preventing the body from entering deeper stages of rest, and gratitude counteracts this by activating parasympathetic pathways associated with calmness and emotional safety. When people focus on emotionally positive and socially supportive experiences before sleep, the brain reduces ruminative thinking, decreases physiological arousal, and shifts attention away from unresolved stress. Gratitude also influences the timing of melatonin release by lowering nighttime stress responses, making it easier to fall asleep and stay asleep. Over time, better sleep quality reinforces emotional stability and cognitive function, further enhancing the capacity to experience and express gratitude, creating a self-reinforcing cycle. Strengthened relationships emerge because gratitude signals recognition, appreciation, and emotional reciprocity. When individuals express gratitude sincerely, others feel valued and understood, increasing trust and openness. This encourages supportive behaviors, which in turn increase opportunities for gratitude to arise. The feedback loop deepens bonds and fosters resilience within relationships, whether romantic, familial, or professional. Gratitude also reduces defensiveness in conflict by shifting attention toward cooperation rather than competition or blame. People are more likely to engage in acts of kindness when they feel seen, and experiencing gratitude from others enhances self-worth, making individuals more willing to invest emotionally in relationships. Consistent gratitude can reshape social identity. Instead of perceiving interactions through mistrust or scarcity, regular practice trains the brain to notice supportive behavior and interpret relationships as sources of stability. This perception affects decision-making and emotional responses. Individuals may become more patient, less reactive, and more compassionate because they feel grounded in connection. Over time, gratitude can help cultivate relational cultures, families, workplaces, or communities where appreciation is normalized rather than rare. These environments reduce social anxiety and increase psychological safety, allowing deeper communication and vulnerability. At the behavioral level, gratitude reinforces actions aligned with generosity and empathy. People who feel appreciated are more likely to help others, creating prosocial momentum. Gratitude also encourages self-reflection about how one contributes to others' lives, fostering a sense of purpose and agency. When practiced regularly, gratitude transitions from a momentary emotion to an underlying trait that shapes habits, reactions, and interpersonal dynamics. Through these combined physiological, cognitive, and relational pathways, gratitude becomes a transformative force that improves health and enhances the quality of human connection,